The morning air smelled like jet fuel and fresh coffee when Marcus stepped through the glass doors of Summit Aviation. His worn leather messenger bag hung across his chest, and his boots, polished but old, clicked softly against the marble floor. He was barely 4 feet tall, his frame compact and sturdy, built like someone who'd learned early that the world wouldn't make room for him unless he carved out his own space. His face carried lines that spoke of sleepless nights and silent prayers, but his eyes, deep brown and warm, held something the world hadn't managed to take: hope. The receptionist looked up from her computer, her polite smile flickering for just a moment when she registered his height. Marcus had seen that look 1,000 times. The pause, the recalibration, the effort to seem normal. Sometimes it was worse than outright staring. This performance of politeness that couldn't quite hide the surprise, the questions forming behind people's eyes. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady and kind. "I'm here for the helicopter pilot interview. Marcus Webb." She recovered quickly, typing into her system with manicured nails that clicked against the keyboard. "Of course, Mr. Webb. Please have a seat. Ms. Blackwood will be with you shortly." Marcus nodded and made his way to the waiting area, where leather chairs sat arranged around a coffee table covered in aviation magazines. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see the helipad outside, a sleek black helicopter gleaming in the sun like a promise. Beyond it, the mountains rose against a cloudless sky, their peaks still dusted with early snow that caught the light and scattered it like diamonds. He'd flown routes like this before, back when he'd worked for a small charter company in Montana. Back before everything fell apart, back when Sarah was alive. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen, his neighbor. "Lily drew you another picture for your interview. She says it's for good luck. She believes in you." Marcus smiled, his throat tightening. Lily, his 7-year-old daughter, his entire universe. The reason he was here, dressed in his only good shirt, hoping against hope that someone would see past his stature and see what he could actually do. The reason he got up every morning even when the weight of grief and rejection made it hard to breathe. She had Sarah's eyes, that same spark of mischief and kindness. Every time Marcus looked at his daughter, he saw his wife smiling back at him, and it was both the most beautiful and most painful thing in the world. He pulled out his phone and looked at his lock screen, a photo of Lily from last week, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a paper airplane she'd made. Underneath, in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, she'd written, "Daddy flies the best." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and a woman emerged who commanded attention without saying a word. Victoria Blackwood was tall, nearly 6 feet in her heels, sharp-featured, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus's rent for 3 months. Her heels struck the floor like a judge's gavel, each step precise and purposeful. She carried herself like someone who'd never heard the word no, and wouldn't recognize it if she did. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her makeup flawless, her jewelry minimal but expensive. Everything about her screamed control, power. "Don't waste my time." "Mr. Webb," her voice was clipped, businesslike, with an edge that suggested she had 100 more important things to do. "Yes, ma'am." Marcus stood, extending his hand. She looked at it, then at him, her expression unreadable. Her eyes traveled from his face down to his extended hand, and Marcus could see her processing, calculating. After a pause that lasted a heartbeat too long, just long enough to sting, she shook it briefly. Her grip was firm but perfunctory, and she released his hand like she was eager to wash hers. "Follow me." They walked through corridors lined with photographs of helicopters, certificates, awards. Summit Aviation had been featured in every major business magazine. Victoria's father, Raymond Blackwood, smiled from several of the photos, a barrel-chested man with a white beard and eyes that crinkled with warmth. In the photos with his daughter, though, that warmth seemed dimmed, replaced with something harder to read. Expectation, maybe, or disappointment. Victoria didn't make small talk. She walked 3 paces ahead, never checking to see if Marcus was keeping up, her heels clicking out in impatient rhythm. He noticed other employees stepping aside as she passed, their greetings polite but wary. This was not a beloved boss. This was someone people feared, She led him to a conference room where a panel of 3 other people sat. 2 men in company polos and a woman with a tablet. They stood when Victoria entered, a synchrony that spoke of corporate hierarchy and carefully learned behavior. She waved them back down impatiently. "Have a seat," Victoria said, settling into the chair at the head of the table. Marcus sat, folding his hands on the table. His feet didn't quite touch the floor, but he'd learned long ago not to let that show on his face. He'd developed a way of sitting that maximized his presence, keeping his spine straight, his shoulders back, his gaze level. Sarah used to call it his pilot posture, the way he carried himself when he flew, like he belonged nowhere else but in command. Victoria opened a folder, scanning his resume without looking at him. The silence stretched. One of the men cleared his throat softly. The woman with the tablet glanced at Marcus with something that might have been sympathy. "It says here you have 2,000 flight hours," Victoria said finally. 5 years with Horizon Charter in Montana. Instrument-rated, mountain flying experience. Several commendations. She looked up, her eyes sharp. "Impressive. On paper. That's correct. Why did you leave?" Marcus had prepared for this question, had practiced it in the mirror last night while Lily slept in the next room. But it never got easier. The wound was still fresh, even 2 years later. "My wife passed away 2 years ago. Cancer, ovarian. It was aggressive." He paused, steadying his voice. "I needed to be closer to family, so I moved here to be near my daughter's grandparents. But the job market's been challenging." One of the men on the panel shifted uncomfortably. The woman with the tablet glanced at Victoria, who remained stone-faced. If she felt any sympathy, any human connection to the grief in Marcus's voice, she didn't show it. "Challenging how?" Victoria asked, her tone flat. Marcus chose his words carefully. He'd learned that being too direct about discrimination made people defensive, but being too vague made them think he was hiding something. "I'm qualified for the positions I've applied for. My flight record speaks for itself, but I think some employers have concerns about physical accessibility in the cockpit, whether someone of my stature can handle larger aircraft." "Are you saying you've faced discrimination?" "I'm saying I'm here to prove I can do the job." Victoria closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. She steepled her fingers, studying him with the kind of cold assessment usually reserved for livestock at auction. For the first time, she really looked at him, not past him, not through him, but at him. And what Marcus saw in her eyes wasn't curiosity or compassion. It was calculation, judgment, something that made his skin prickle with warning. "Mr. Webb," she said slowly, her words deliberate, "Summit Aviation is the premier helicopter service in the region. We fly executives, medical transports, emergency rescues. We've been voted the top aviation company in the state for 3 consecutive years. Our pilots need to inspire confidence. They need to project—" She paused, and Marcus knew exactly what word was coming. Authority. The word hung in the air like smoke. Marcus felt the familiar weight settling in his chest, that stone-heavy feeling he'd carried since childhood. The feeling of being judged before he'd even opened his mouth. Of being found wanting because of something he couldn't control. With respect, Ms. Blackwood, authority comes from competence, not height. Does it? She stood walking to the window with theatrical slowness. She gazed out at the helipad, at the mountain vista beyond, letting the silence build. It was a power play, Marcus recognized. Make him wait. Make him feel small, smaller than he already was. "Tell me, when was the last time you flew?" 14 months ago. 14 months. She turned back to face him, her expression mockingly concerned. "And you expect me to put you in a multi-million-dollar aircraft with paying clients aboard, clients who are paying premium prices for premium service? I expect you to look at my record," Marcus said quietly, but with an edge now. He was tired. Tired of this dance. Tired of defending his existence. Tired of being polite to people who'd already dismissed him. 0 accidents. 0 incidents. Commendations from every employer I've had. "I can send you references." Victoria held up a hand, cutting him off. "I don't need references. I need reality. And the reality is—" She paused, and something shifted in her expression. Something cruel crept into her eyes, a glint of malicious amusement. The panel members tensed visibly. They'd seen this before, Marcus realized. They knew what was coming. She smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone about to crush an insect and enjoy the act. "Tell you what, Mr. Webb, I'll make you a deal." Something in her tone made Marcus's skin prickle. The woman with the tablet looked down at her lap. One of the men closed his eyes briefly, as if bracing for impact. "See that helicopter out there?" Victoria gestured to the window. "That's a Bell 429, dual engine, glass cockpit, top of the line. Worth about $8 million. State-of-the-art avionics, fully equipped for IFR flight, emergency medical configuration. It's the finest machine in our fleet." She leaned against the conference table, her smile widening, her eyes glittering with something cruel and sharp. "Fly it for me right now, just a standard pattern around the facility, and if you can handle it, the job is yours." She paused, letting the challenge settle. Then she delivered the kill shot. "Hell, I'll even marry you." The room went silent, complete, crushing silence. One of the men coughed, a strangled sound. The woman with the tablet stared at her lap, her face flushed with second-hand embarrassment. The other man looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. Victoria's eyes glittered with something that made Marcus's stomach turn. "What do you say, Mr. Webb? Think you can handle it?" She let the pause stretch, savoring it. Sport? The word landed like a slap. Sport. Little man. The casual cruelty wrapped in a professional veneer, the mockery disguised as banter. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Not from the challenge. He could fly that helicopter in his sleep. Could probably fly it better than anyone in this building, including Victoria herself. But from the mockery. The casual, careless cruelty of it. The way she'd turned his job interview into entertainment. His dignity into a joke. He'd faced it before, countless times. The substitute teacher in 3rd grade who'd called him Little Buddy in front of the whole class. The flight instructor who'd suggested he consider a different career path. The woman at the grocery store last week who'd patted his head like he was a child, while Lily watched with confused, hurt eyes. It never stopped cutting deep. It never stopped making him feel like he was 6 years old again, sitting in the doctor's office while they explained to his parents that he'd never be normal, never be tall, never be like other people. But he thought of Lily. Her gap-toothed smile when he'd left this morning, her small arms wrapped around his neck, the way she'd hugged him and whispered, "You're going to get the job, Daddy. I know you are, because you're the best pilot in the whole world." He thought of the stack of rejection letters in his desk drawer, each one a polite variation of not the right fit. He thought of the mortgage payment due next week, the one he couldn't make. The phone call from Lily's school about the field trip fee, $50, just $50, that he'd had to say no to. The way her face had fallen, the way she'd tried to hide her disappointment and told him it was okay. She didn't really want to go anyway. He thought of Mrs. Chen, his neighbor, who babysat Lily for free because she knew Marcus couldn't afford childcare, of eating ramen 3 nights a week so Lily could have fresh fruit with her lunch. Of the slow, grinding poverty that had closed around them like a fist since Sarah died, since the medical bills had taken everything, since he'd been unable to find work in a world that saw his height before it saw his skills. "All right," he said softly. "I'll fly it." Victoria's smile faltered. She blinked, her performance momentarily disrupted. She hadn't expected him to agree. She'd expected him to storm out, or crumble, or beg. That was the point of the exercise, to humiliate him into leaving on his own so she could tell herself she hadn't really rejected him. "I'm sorry?" Marcus stood, his voice steady despite the hurricane in his chest. "I said I'll fly it. Right now. Just give me the pre-flight checklist and the keys." The room erupted in whispers. The panel members exchanged shocked glances. Victoria straightened, her expression hardening as she realized her bluff had been called. "You're serious." "As serious as you were making that offer." Marcus held her gaze, and he saw something flicker there. Uncertainty, maybe even a flash of respect. Or fear. "Unless you weren't serious." unless it was just a joke, a way to mock someone who came here in good faith looking for work. The accusation hung in the air. Victoria's jaw tightened. She'd boxed herself into a corner, and she knew it. Backing down now would make her look weak in front of her staff, would confirm that she'd been cruel for cruelty's sake. But letting him fly was a risk. If he crashed, if he damaged the aircraft, the liability would be enormous. Marcus saw her calculating, saw her pride warring with her self-preservation. Pride won. "Fine," she said coldly, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Johnson, get the bell prepped. Mr. Webb, you'll fly with me in the observer seat. Let's see what you've got." She turned to the rest of the panel. "Meeting adjourned. Everyone to the tarmac. I want witnesses to this." 20 minutes later, Marcus stood on the tarmac, completing his walk-around inspection. The morning had warmed, the sun climbing higher, and he could feel sweat gathering at the small of his back. Not from the heat, from the weight of what he was about to do. Around him a crowd had gathered, the interview panel, various staff members, even a couple of mechanics who'd emerged from the hangar, wiping oil from their hands. Word had spread fast. Victoria stood nearby with arms crossed, flanked by her senior staff, her face a mask of cold anticipation. Marcus forced himself to focus. The helicopter was beautiful, he had to admit. A Bell 429, one of the most sophisticated civilian helicopters made. $8 million of composite materials, titanium, and cutting-edge avionics. He walked around it slowly, methodically, his hands moving with practiced precision. Check the rotor hub for cracks or wear. Inspect the Jesus nut, the main rotor retention nut that held everything together. Check the tail rotor for damage. Verify the fuel ports are secure and free from contamination. Inspect the landing gear, the skids, looking for any signs of stress or damage. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Does he even know what he's doing?" "Probably just putting on a show," another voice said, male and dismissive. "There's no way he can—" "Quiet," Victoria snapped, but there was something uncertain in her voice now. Marcus finished his inspection, taking his time. This was the ritual every pilot knew, the sacred choreography of safety. Sarah used to tease him about how seriously he took it, how he'd inspect the same aircraft he'd flown yesterday, the same aircraft he'd fly tomorrow, with the same meticulous care every single time. "That's because yesterday doesn't matter," he'd tell her. "Today is the only day I can make sure we're safe." And she'd kiss him and say that's why she trusted him completely, why she'd fly anywhere with him, even to the moon. He felt her presence now, like she was standing beside him in the sunshine, watching, believing in him the way she always had. Marcus climbed into the pilot's seat, and for a moment he let himself just feel it. The familiar embrace of the cockpit, the solid weight of the controls under his hands. This was where he belonged, where his height didn't matter, where the only things that counted were skill and judgment and the delicate dance between machine and sky. The cockpit was indeed state-of-the-art, with digital displays and controls that made his old Montana aircraft look like a museum piece. But a helicopter was a helicopter. The principles didn't change. Lift, thrust, drag, weight, the four forces that governed flight, whether you were 4 feet tall or 7. His feet easily reached the pedals. He'd flown with custom adaptations before, but this aircraft was adjustable enough that he could configure it properly. He moved the seat forward, adjusted the pedals, set everything to his specifications with quick, confident movements. Victoria climbed into the observer seat beside him, buckling in with sharp, angry movements. She put on her headset, and her voice crackled through the comm, harsh and challenging. "Whenever you're ready, Mr. Webb, take your time. We've got all day." Marcus took a breath. Just one, deep and steadying. He closed his eyes for just a moment and felt the familiar calm settle over him. The place he went when the world fell away and there was only the machine, the sky, and the sacred responsibility of flight. This was the space Sarah used to call his pilot zen, the transformation that happened when he climbed into a cockpit. The worries fell away, the hurts and rejections and daily humiliations. There was only the present moment, the aircraft, the mission. He thought of Lily's picture, folded in his wallet. A stick-figure daddy standing next to a helicopter, surrounded by hearts and the words, "Best pilot ever," in crayon. She'd drawn it last night at the kitchen table while he'd reviewed Bell 429 specifications on his laptop, preparing for an interview he'd thought would be professional and fair. She'd used every color in her crayon box, had worked on it for almost an hour with her tongue stuck out in concentration the way she did when she was really focused. "This is for good luck, Daddy," she'd said, presenting it to him with ceremonial seriousness. "Because you're going to get the job. I know you are." "How do you know, Sweet Pea?" "Because you're the best, and they'll see it. They'll see how good you are." If only, Marcus had thought, if only the world worked that way. But maybe it could. Maybe today. He opened his eyes and began the startup sequence. Battery master, on. Fuel pumps, on. Engine start sequence initiated. The turbines whined to life, building from a whisper to a roar. The sound was beautiful, that distinctive helicopter sound that was like nothing else in the world. The collective felt solid in his left hand, the cyclic responsive in his right. The pedals under his feet responded to the slightest pressure. Everything felt right. Everything felt like home. He made his radio call to the tower, his voice calm and professional. "Summit Tower, this is November 429 Summit Alpha, ready for departure from the main helipad, standard pattern, remaining in sight of the facility." The tower responded immediately. "Summit Alpha, you're cleared for takeoff. Standard pattern. Winds are light and variable. Have a good flight." Marcus gently increased collective pitch, feeling the helicopter respond. The vibration changed, the rotor disc biting into the air. The skids lifted off the tarmac, 1 inch, 2 inches, perfectly level, and they were flying, hovering. The bell hung in the air like it was suspended by invisible wires. Through his headset, Marcus heard Victoria's sharp intake of breath. He let the helicopter hang there for a moment, demonstrating perfect control, no drift, no oscillation, just solid, stable hover. Then he smoothly transitioned into forward flight, the nose dipping slightly as he fed in cyclic, the helicopter accelerating with silky precision. The tarmac fell away beneath them, the gathered crowd shrinking to toy figures. And Marcus flew. He climbed to pattern altitude, 500 feet AGL, banking smoothly around the facility in a perfect oval. His movements were minimal, just small pressures on the controls, the helicopter responding like it was reading his mind. This was what people didn't understand about flying, especially helicopter flying. It wasn't about forcing the machine to obey. It was about communicating with it, about becoming part of a unified system where pilot and aircraft moved as one. The mountains stretched before him, magnificent and eternal. Early morning light painted them in shades of purple and gold. Beyond them, he could see the valley spreading out, patchwork farms and distant towns, roads like veins carrying life through the landscape. For a moment, just a moment, Marcus let himself remember what it felt like to be free. To be judged by what he could do, not what he looked like. To be seen. He performed a pedal turn, the helicopter rotating smoothly around its vertical axis, then a sideways translation, moving laterally across the sky without changing heading. Advanced maneuvers, things that demonstrated fine control. He wanted there to be no doubt. No room for Victoria to claim he'd just gotten lucky. Through the headset, he heard her breathing, quick and shallow. "You okay?" he asked. A long pause. "I'm fine. Keep flying." Marcus completed the pattern, bringing them around for approach. He set up perfectly, managing his speed and descent rate, the facility growing larger in his windscreen. This was the hardest part, the place where inexperienced pilots got into trouble. Too fast, and you couldn't arrest your descent in time. Too slow, and you'd settle with power, the helicopter sinking faster than the engine could compensate. You had to feel it, had to read the aircraft's energy state like you were reading a book. Marcus felt it. He'd always been able to feel it, even as a student pilot when his instructor had marveled at his natural touch. The helicopter whispered to him, told him what it needed, and he gave it. More collective here, less cyclic there, a touch of right pedal to stay aligned with the wind. They descended through 100 feet, 50 feet, 25. The tarmac rushed up to meet them, but Marcus was already cushioning the descent, pulling in collective to slow their sink rate. The skids kissed the ground without so much as a shudder, a landing so soft you could balance a wine glass on the instrument panel and not spill a drop. As he completed the shutdown sequence, reducing throttle, rolling off the twist grip, watching the instruments wind down, the silence in the cockpit felt thunderous. The turbines spooled down, their whine fading to nothing. Around them, Marcus could see the crowd standing in stunned silence. Someone's mouth was hanging open. Someone else was shaking their head in disbelief. Finally, Victoria spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, and it carried something Marcus hadn't heard before. Awe. Maybe even fear. "Who are you?" Marcus removed his headset and turned to face her. Her face had gone pale, her earlier arrogance completely stripped away. She looked shaken, like someone who just had the ground shift beneath their feet, like someone who just realized they'd made a terrible mistake. "I'm a pilot," Marcus said simply. "I'm a father, and I'm someone who needed this job." Victoria unbuckled with trembling hands and climbed out without another word. Marcus followed, his legs slightly shaky as he descended to the tarmac. The gathered crowd stood in stunned silence, none of them quite sure what to do. Victoria walked a few paces away, her back to everyone, her shoulders rising and falling with deep breaths. Marcus could see her hand come up to her face, could see her wipe at her eyes. When she finally turned around, her eyes were red, her mascara smudged at the corners. She looked like a different person from the woman who'd mocked him 30 minutes ago. "Clear the tarmac," she said to her staff, her voice hoarse and strained. "Everyone back inside, now. This is not a show." They scattered like leaves in wind, grateful for the dismissal. Marcus watched them go, watched them casting glances back over their shoulders, whispering to each other. This would be all over the company by lunchtime, he knew. The story would grow with each telling. The dwarf pilot who'd called Victoria Blackwood's bluff and proven her wrong. Victoria walked slowly back to Marcus, and when she stopped in front of him, she didn't tower over him with superiority anymore. She just looked human, broken, even, lost. "I don't—" She struggled with the words, her voice cracking. "I don't know what to say." Marcus said nothing. He just waited, the way his father had taught him. Let people fill their own silences. Let them work through their own shame. "My father built this company," Victoria said finally, the words tumbling out now like she couldn't hold them back anymore. "Raymond Blackwood. He was brilliant, demanding, impossible to please. A force of nature. Started with one helicopter and a dream, built it into the largest private aviation company in 3 states. Her voice was thick with emotion. "When he died 3 years ago, everyone said I couldn't run it, that I was just a trust fund princess playing businesswoman. They said I'd run it into the ground within a year. Every business journal predicted our failure. Every competitor started circling like sharks." She turned to look at the helicopter, at the mountains beyond. "So I became hard, cold. I fired anyone who questioned me. I made decisions that were about proving I was tough, not about what was right. I decided I'd never show weakness again. Never let anyone question me. Never be soft or kind or vulnerable, because those things would destroy me in this industry." She laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "And somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be human." Victoria looked back at Marcus, and tears were streaming freely down her face now. "What I did in there, what I said to you, that was unforgivable. I took your dignity, your livelihood, your need for work, and I turned it into a joke. I mocked you for something you can't control because I'm so goddamned angry all the time and I don't even know who I'm angry at anymore." "It was cruel," Marcus said quietly. "But we've all been cruel. The question is what we do after." Victoria's face crumpled. "You're a better person than I am. You should hate me. You should sue me. God knows you'd win. I'm just a person trying to provide for his daughter." Marcus pulled out his wallet, unfolding Lily's picture with careful hands. "This is why I'm here. Not to prove anything to you or anyone else. Not to make a point or teach a lesson. just to be the father she deserves, to put food on our table and keep a roof over our heads and maybe, if I'm lucky, show her that good things can happen if you keep trying. Victoria looked at the picture and something in her broke completely. A tear slid down her cheek, then another. What's her name? Lily. She's 7. Smart as hell, funny, kind, everything I'm not good enough to have earned. She believes in me even when I don't believe in myself. She thinks I'm a hero. His voice cracked. I'm terrified every day that I'll let her down, that the world will break her the way it tried to break me. Don't say that. Victoria wiped her eyes roughly, smearing her mascara further. Anyone who flies like that, who carries himself like you do after everything you've been through, you're exactly the father she needs. You're exactly the hero she thinks you are. They stood in silence for a moment, the wind tugging at their clothes, carrying the scent of jet fuel and possibility. A bird called somewhere overhead. In the distance, Marcus could hear the sounds of the facility resuming normal operations. People trying to pretend they hadn't just witnessed something extraordinary. I meant what I said. Victoria finally spoke, her voice steadier now. About the job. It's yours. Full salary, benefits, whatever you need. I'll have HR draw up the paperwork today. You can start as soon as you want. Marcus felt his knees go weak. He'd been so focused on the flying, on proving himself, that he hadn't let himself believe this moment might actually come. Thank you. You don't know what this means. Don't thank me. Victoria's voice was firm. You earned it the moment you walked through that door. I was just too blind and too bitter to see it. She paused, taking a deep breath. As for the other thing I said, we can forget about that, Marcus said quickly, his face flushing. The marriage thing. That was just... We can pretend that didn't happen. No, Victoria said firmly, and something in her voice made Marcus look up. We can't. Because I need you to understand something. I've spent years surrounding myself with people who tell me what I want to hear. People who are impressed by my money, my company, my last name. People who smile to my face and mock me behind my back. People who want something from me. Her eyes locked on his. You're the first person in a long time who looked me in the eye and demanded I be better. Who saw through my cruelty and responded with grace. Who met my worst with your best. She wiped her eyes again. That means something. That means more than you know. Over the following months, Marcus settled into his new role at Summit Aviation like he'd been born to it. His first day had been awkward. Everyone had heard about the incident with Victoria, and no one quite knew how to treat him. But Marcus did what he always did. He let his work speak for itself. He flew executives to mountain retreats, handling turbulent mountain weather with calm expertise. He transported medical supplies to remote clinics, making impossible landings on tiny helipads carved into cliffsides. He assisted in a rescue operation during a freak snowstorm, hovering his helicopter in whiteout conditions while paramedics pulled an injured hiker to safety. That rescue made the news, and suddenly Marcus Webb wasn't just the dwarf pilot anymore. He was that incredible pilot from Summit Aviation. His reputation grew quickly, spreading through the tight-knit aviation community. Other pilots sought his advice on mountain flying techniques. Students asked if he'd consider teaching. The FAA inspector who came for a routine check ride left shaking his head in amazement, saying it was the best flying he'd seen in 20 years. Victoria kept her distance at first, professional and cordial but never crossing the boundary into friendship. She'd nod when they passed in the hallways. She'd sign off on his flight reports without comment. But Marcus would catch her watching sometimes, observing how he interacted with clients, how he mentored younger pilots, how he talked about Lily with pure, uncomplicated love in his voice. She started staying late in the office when she knew he'd be doing post-flight paperwork, finding excuses to stop by his desk in the pilot's lounge. How was the flight? She'd ask, standing in the doorway like she wasn't quite sure she was welcome. Good. Client was nervous about the weather. Said he'd heard mountain flying was dangerous, but we got through it fine. You have a gift for making people feel safe. Their conversations grew longer, deeper. Victoria would bring 2 cups of coffee and sit in the chair across from his desk, and they'd talk about flying, about the industry, about life. Marcus learned that she'd wanted to be a pilot herself, had actually started training before her father died, and the weight of the company crushed that dream. She kept her pilot's logbook in her desk drawer, 60 hours frozen in time, a ghost of the person she might have been. "Why don't you finish?" Marcus asked one evening. "You've got access to the best aircraft and instructors in the state." "Because I'm scared," Victoria admitted. "Scared I'll be bad at it. Scared people will say I only got my license because I own the company. Scared that my father was right when he said some people are meant to fly and some people are meant to stay on the ground." "Your father was wrong about a lot of things," Marcus said gently. "You should fly, not for anyone else. For yourself." So she did. Victoria started training again, and Marcus, at her request, became her instructor. They'd go up in the early mornings, before the facility got busy, and he'd teach her the things his own instructors had taught him. How to feel the helicopter, how to read the air, how to trust yourself and the machine in equal measure. She was a cautious student, overly conscious of every mistake, but Marcus had infinite patience. "You're fighting the controls," he'd say. "Stop trying to force it. Let the helicopter tell you what it needs." Slowly, Victoria learned to let go, to trust, to fly. One evening, after a particularly good lesson where she'd nailed her first hovering turn, they sat in the helicopter watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and orange. Victoria pulled off her headset, her hair disheveled, her face flushed with accomplishment. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not just for teaching me to fly, for seeing past what I was. For giving me a chance to be different." "People aren't fixed," Marcus said. "We're all becoming. Every day, we get to choose who we become." It was during these morning flights, these quiet hours suspended between earth and sky, that their relationship began to shift. Marcus started to see past Victoria's brittle shell to the lonely, wounded person underneath. A woman who'd inherited an empire she'd never asked for, who'd sacrificed her dreams to honor a father who'd never really approved of her. A woman who'd built walls so high she'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. And Victoria started to see Marcus, really see him. Not as the pilot who'd humiliated her, not as a problem or a charity case, but as a man of profound depth and quiet strength. A man who'd lost everything and rebuilt himself. A man who loved his daughter with a fierceness that took her breath away. A man who, despite every reason to be bitter, chose kindness. Their conversations grew longer, deeper. Marcus learned about Victoria's childhood, growing up in a mansion with every material thing, but no one who truly saw her. Her mother had left when she was 6, unable to handle Raymond Blackwood's demanding nature. Victoria had been raised by nannies and tutors, educated at the finest schools, given every advantage except the one thing she needed: love. "He never hugged me," Victoria said one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. They were sitting in the pilot's lounge after everyone else had gone home, the building quiet around them. "Not once that I can remember. When I graduated from business school, top of my class, he shook my hand. That was it, a handshake." "That must have been incredibly lonely," Marcus said. "It was, but I told myself I didn't need it. I told myself love was for weak people, people who couldn't stand on their own." She laughed bitterly. "And then I became him, cold, hard, measuring everyone by what they could do for me. I even ruined my engagement because I couldn't let myself be vulnerable." Marcus learned about Jason, Victoria's ex-fiancé, a real estate developer from old money who'd seemed perfect on paper. But when Raymond died and Victoria inherited the company, Jason had started making suggestions. Maybe she should sell. Maybe she wasn't cut out for this. Maybe she should focus on being a wife instead of trying to be a CEO. The engagement had ended badly, with Jason telling her she was too cold to love, too broken to fix. "Maybe he was right," Victoria said. "He wasn't," Marcus said firmly. "You're not broken. You're just hurt. There's a difference." Victoria looked at him with something like wonder. "How do you do that? How do you stay so good after losing your wife, after all the rejection, after what I did to you?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. My father told me something when I was young. He said the world will always have opinions about what you can't do. The only thing that matters is what you choose to do anyway. I could choose to be angry, to be bitter. God knows I have days where I want to be. But Lily doesn't deserve an angry father. She deserves someone who shows her that life is hard, but it's still worth living with your whole heart. Your father sounds wise. He is. He's been a rock for us since Sarah died. He and Lily's grandmother, Sarah's mother, they help however they can. Marcus smiled. Dad keeps telling me it's time to start living again, to find someone. But how do you do that when part of you died with her? Victoria reached across the space between them and took his hand. The gesture was tentative, uncertain, but real. Maybe you don't replace what you lost. Maybe you just make room for something new. The first time Victoria met Lily was carefully orchestrated. Marcus had been nervous, checking with his daughter first, making sure she was comfortable with the idea. Lily had been curious, a little wary. Is she nice, Daddy? The lady from your work? She's learning to be, Marcus had said, which made Lily giggle. It was a Saturday, warm and bright. Victoria appeared at the park wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt, looking more nervous than Marcus had ever seen her. She carried a kite, a big rainbow one that she'd spent an hour picking out at the store, agonizing over which one a 7-year-old girl would like. Lily had hidden behind Marcus's leg when Victoria approached, her small hand gripping his shirt. "Hi, Lily," Victoria said, crouching down to be at eye level. "I'm Victoria. Your dad has told me so much about you. He says you're an amazing artist." Lily peeked out. "You're really tall." Victoria laughed, genuine and surprised. "I am. Is that okay?" "I guess so. Daddy's really short and he's okay." "Lily," Marcus said, but both Victoria and his daughter were giggling now. "You're absolutely right," Victoria said. "It's what's inside that matters, isn't it?" Within an hour, Lily was laughing as they ran together trying to get the kite airborne. Victoria had no idea what she was doing, tangling the string, running the wrong direction, falling down in the grass. But she was trying, and Lily could see that. When the kite finally caught the wind and soared upward, both of them cheered like they'd won the lottery. Marcus watched from a bench, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. Victoria was playing with his daughter, not performing, not putting on a show, but genuinely playing. She fell down in the grass, and Lily fell down beside her, both of them giggling breathlessly at the sky. Victoria's expensive clothes were grass-stained. Her carefully styled hair was a mess. Her makeup was smudged from sweat and laughter. She looked beautiful. It became a routine. Weekends at the park became weekends at museums, at movies, at ice cream shops where Lily would order the biggest sundae and Victoria would help her finish it. Victoria learned to braid hair, badly at first, with Lily patiently instructing her. She learned to play dolls, to watch cartoons without checking her phone, to read bedtime stories with all the voices. Dinners at Marcus's modest apartment became a regular thing. Victoria learned to make Lily's favorite spaghetti, following a recipe that had been Sarah's. The first time Marcus tasted it, his eyes filled with tears. "It's perfect," he whispered. Victoria didn't even flinch at the mismatched furniture, the cramped kitchen, the way Marcus had to use a step stool to reach the high cabinets. She sat on the worn couch like it was a throne and played board games with Lily like it was the most important thing in the world. Movie nights where Lily fell asleep between them on the couch became precious, sacred. They'd sit in comfortable silence, watching her dream, and neither of them wanted to move, wanted to break the spell of this small, perfect family tableau. "I don't deserve this," Victoria whispered one of those nights, stroking Lily's hair while the child slept. "None of us deserve anything," Marcus whispered back. "We just get to choose how we show up." "I spent so many years not showing up," Victoria said, her voice thick with regret. "I had everything, and I felt nothing. Now I have nothing. No husband, no real friends, a company that respects me but doesn't like me. And I feel everything. Being with you two, it's like learning to breathe for the first time." Marcus reached across Lily's sleeping form and took Victoria's hand. They sat like that for a long time, connected by this small girl and something deeper, something neither of them was quite ready to name. Lily noticed before they did. Children always do. She started drawing pictures of the three of them together, Marcus, Victoria, and Lily, holding hands under a smiling sun. She'd ask when Victoria was coming over next. Would she be at dinner? Could they call her? One evening, while Marcus was tucking her into bed, Lily looked up at him with Sarah's eyes and said, "Daddy, do you like Victoria?" Marcus's heart stuttered. "She's a good friend, sweet pea." "But do you like her? Like how you liked Mommy?" Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. "Your Mommy was very special. I loved her so much." "I know," Lily said seriously. "But Mommy would want you to be happy. She told me that." Marcus's breath caught. "When did she tell you that?" "Before she went to heaven. She said she was going to watch over us, and she wanted us to laugh and be happy and maybe someday have more people to love." Lily's small hand found his. "I think Victoria could be one of those people. She's nice now, and she makes you smile, Daddy. The real kind of smile, not the pretend one." Marcus pulled his daughter into a hug, overwhelmed by her wisdom, her generous heart. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart," Lily said matter-of-factly. "You just didn't notice because I'm 7. The first kiss happened on a clear autumn evening after they'd put Lily to bed. They were standing on Marcus's small balcony, watching the city lights, the air cool and crisp with the promise of winter coming. Victoria turned to him with tears in her eyes. "I'm falling in love with you," she said, the words raw and frightened. "And I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to be in love. I don't know if I'm capable of it without ruining everything." Marcus reached up and took her hand, pulling her down to his level. "Maybe you don't have to do anything. Maybe you just have to let it be real." When their lips met, it felt like something cosmic clicking into place. Like two broken pieces finding their match, their edges fitting together perfectly despite all the ways they'd been shattered. Victoria tasted like the wine they'd shared at dinner, like hope, like coming home. Marcus felt himself falling, surrendering to something he'd thought he'd never feel again. When they broke apart, both of them were crying. "I'm scared," Victoria whispered. "Me too," Marcus whispered back. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe being scared means it matters." They took it slow, careful. Neither of them wanted to rush to risk what they were building. Victoria had her own apartment across town, but she started staying over more and more. Lily adored her. The three of them became a unit, a family in everything but name. Marcus's father came to visit one weekend, the gruff old man who'd raised Marcus to be strong and kind in equal measure. He watched Victoria with Lily, watched the way she braided the child's hair and kissed her forehead, the way she looked at Marcus like he was the center of her universe. "She's good for you," he told Marcus privately. "But more importantly, you're good for her. She was dying inside before you came along. You can see it in old photos. The emptiness. Now she's alive." "I never thought I'd feel this way again," Marcus admitted. "After Sarah," his father gripped his shoulder. "Sarah loved you with her whole heart. And part of that love was wanting you to be happy after she was gone. You're not betraying her by loving again. You're honoring her by staying open to life." The engagement happened 6 months later, not at a fancy restaurant or during a helicopter ride, but at home during one of Lily's famous family meetings. She'd started them months ago, insisting that families made decisions together. They'd voted on pizza toppings, bedtime routines, which movies to watch. She took them very seriously, calling them to order with a wooden spoon as a gavel. This particular evening, Lily had called an emergency family meeting with unusual gravity. Marcus and Victoria sat on the couch holding hands, wondering what 7-year-old crisis was about to unfold. "I've been thinking," Lily announced, standing before them like a tiny CEO. "We're basically a family already, right?" "Right," Victoria said, smiling. "But we're not official. Victoria doesn't live here all the time. And she's not really my mom, but she kind of is in my heart." Lily looked at her father. "Daddy, what do grown-ups do when they want to make a family official?" Marcus's heart was pounding. "Well, Usually they get married. Okay then. Lily nodded decisively. I vote that you and Victoria get married. All in favor say aye. Lily, Marcus started. Aye, Lily shouted, raising her hand. There was a pause. Then Victoria, tears streaming down her face, whispered, Aye. Marcus looked at both of them. This woman who'd come into his life like a storm and taught him that people could change, could choose to be better. This daughter who'd inherited her mother's generous heart and taught him that love wasn't finite, that making room for new love didn't diminish what came before. He pulled out a small box from his pocket. He'd been carrying it for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Apparently, Lily had known. She'd probably planned this entire thing. I have something to ask, Marcus said, his voice shaking. Lily and I talked about it, and we both agree. Victoria, you've changed our lives. You've shown me that it's possible to be seen, to be valued for who I am. You've shown Lily what it means to choose love every day, even when it's hard. You've become part of us in a way that feels like you were always meant to be here. He opened the box, revealing a simple ring, not expensive but chosen with care. A silver band with a small diamond, elegant and understated, Victoria's style. Will you marry us? Marcus asked, and Lily jumped up, her hands clasped together. Please say yes, Lily added. Please, 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 I really want you to be my bonus mom. That's what my friend Zoe calls her stepmom, and I think it's perfect because you're a bonus, like extra love we get to have. Victoria looked between them. This man who'd taught her what courage really meant, who'd shown her that strength came in all sizes and that the biggest hearts often lived in the smallest frames. And this little girl who'd taught her what love felt like, what it meant to be needed and wanted, not for what you had but for who you were. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face, and pulled them both into a hug. Yes, she sobbed. Yes, yes, yes. 1,000 times yes. Lily cheered so loud the neighbors probably heard. She danced around the living room singing, We're getting married! We're getting married! Victoria slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, because Marcus had secretly measured her finger weeks ago, and kissed Marcus like he was oxygen and she'd been drowning. That night, after Lily had finally exhausted herself and fallen asleep, Marcus and Victoria lay in bed holding each other. I was so broken when you walked into my life, Victoria whispered in the darkness. I'd convinced myself that being hard was the same as being strong. That vulnerability was weakness. That love was something that happened to other people. And now? Marcus asked. Now I know that the hardest thing in the world is staying soft, staying open, choosing to love even when you're terrified. She kissed his forehead. You taught me that. You and Lily. You saved my life. You saved mine too, Marcus said. I was drowning in grief and rejection, convinced that the world would never see past my height. You saw me. Really saw me. Not what I looked like, but who I was. I almost didn't, Victoria said, shame thick in her voice. That first day, I was so cruel. But you changed. That's what matters. We all make mistakes. What defines us is what we do after. They lay in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the city outside, the distant hum of traffic, the wind in the trees. Do you think Sarah would approve? Victoria asked quietly. Marcus thought about his late wife, about her kindness, her enormous capacity for love. He remembered something she'd said near the end, when the pain was bad and she knew she didn't have much time left. Promise me something, Sarah had whispered, her hand weak in his. Promise me you won't stop living. Promise me you'll find love again when you're ready. I want Lily to grow up seeing that it's possible to lose everything and still choose joy. That love isn't finite. That making room for new people doesn't mean forgetting old ones. Yes, Marcus said now, certainty in his voice. She'd love you. She'd love seeing Lily so happy. She'd love knowing we found each other. The wedding was small, held at the aviation facility with the Bell 429 in the background, the helicopter that had changed everything. They'd had it specially cleaned and polished until it gleamed like a jewel. The ceremony took place at sunset, The mountains painted in shades of orange and gold, the sky vast and infinite above them. Marcus's father flew in from Montana, gruff but proud, his eyes suspiciously wet throughout the ceremony. Victoria's handful of real friends came, not the society climbers she used to know, but the people who'd stuck around when she started becoming human again. The staff from Summit Aviation came, many of them shocked at how different their boss looked. Happy, radiant, real. But the most important guest was Lily, who'd insisted on being the flower girl. She wore a dress with helicopter prints that she'd picked out herself, refusing anything princess-themed because helicopters are cooler than princesses, Daddy. Everyone knows that. She took her job seriously, scattering petals with solemn concentration, then standing beside Marcus and Victoria with enormous pride. When Marcus and Victoria exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. Victoria spoke first, her voice shaking but clear. Marcus, when you walked into my life, I was a shell of a person. I had everything and felt nothing. I'd built walls so high that I couldn't see the sky anymore. You taught me to fly, not just in helicopters, but in life. You taught me that being strong means being vulnerable, that love is a choice we make every day, that the size of a person's heart has nothing to do with their height. She looked down at Lily, then back at Marcus. You and Lily have shown me what family really means. Not blood or obligation, but choice. Choosing each other every single day. I promise to be worthy of that choice. I promise to love you both with everything I have. I promise to be the woman you see when you look at me, the better version of myself that you somehow knew was in there, even when I'd forgotten. Marcus cleared his throat, his own voice thick with emotion. Victoria, you taught me to see past my own fear. You taught me that people can change, can choose to be better. When I met you, you were angry and hurt and pushing everyone away. You tried to humiliate me, to break me. But somewhere in that moment, I saw something else. I saw someone who was scared, who was fighting so hard to prove herself that she'd forgotten how to be herself. He squeezed her hands. You taught me that it's okay to be seen and loved exactly as I am, that my size doesn't define my value. You taught Lily that love means showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I promise to challenge you when you need it, to support you always, to fly beside you wherever life takes us. Then, in a moment that hadn't been planned, Lily tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Can I say something? Marcus nodded, lifting her up so she could see everyone. Victoria, Lily said seriously, her 7-year-old voice carrying across the assembled guests. I'm really glad you're going to be my bonus mom. At first, I wasn't sure because I love my real mom who's in heaven. But Daddy says love isn't like pizza where if someone else gets a slice, you get less. Love is like magic. The more you share it, the more there is. So I have enough love for both my moms. And I'm really, really happy you're going to live with us all the time now. Victoria was crying openly, mascara running, not caring at all. I'm really, really happy too, sweetheart. Being your bonus mom is the best thing that's ever happened to me. The officiant, barely holding it together himself, pronounced them husband and wife. When Marcus and Victoria kissed, Lily cheered so loud it echoed off the hangar walls. The small crowd erupted in applause and someone, one of the younger pilots, started crying so hard they had to sit down. The reception was held in the hangar, with simple decorations and catered food that Marcus had insisted on helping pay for despite Victoria's protests. There was no DJ, just a playlist of songs they all loved. No formal dances, just people celebrating, laughing, being genuinely happy. Marcus's father gave a toast that had everyone in tears. My son has faced more rejection in his life than most people face in 10 lifetimes, and every single time, he got back up. He taught himself to fly because he wanted to touch the sky. He raised his daughter alone after losing his wife because love doesn't quit, and he won the heart of the toughest woman in the aviation industry because he showed her what real strength looks like. He raised his glass. To Marcus and Victoria, may you always remember that the best things in life are worth fighting for. As the evening wore on, Victoria found herself standing alone for a moment, watching Marcus dance with Lily to some silly pop song, both of them laughing as he twirled her around. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, cold, bitter, convinced that love was for people too weak to stand alone. She thought about that morning when Marcus had walked into her office, and she'd seen only his height, not his heart. "You look happy," said one of the mechanics, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. "I am," Victoria said, surprised by how simple the truth was. "I really am." "You're good together," the mechanic continued. "He's good for you. You're different now. Better." "He saved my life," Victoria said simply. "Him and Lily both." Years later, people would talk about Summit Aviation's transformation. How it became the most inclusive aviation company in the region, hiring pilots based on skill rather than appearance. How Victoria Blackwood Webb personally reviewed every application, looking for talent that other companies might overlook. How they'd launched a scholarship fund for underprivileged students pursuing aviation careers, with special emphasis on applicants from underrepresented communities. The company flourished under Victoria's leadership, but now it was leadership tempered with humanity. She learned to trust her staff, to delegate, to admit when she didn't know something. The culture shifted from fear-based to respect-based. People wanted to work for Summit Aviation, not just because of the salary, but because of what the company represented. Marcus became the chief pilot, mentoring a new generation of aviators. He was particularly patient with students who struggled, with people who'd been told they couldn't do something because of who they were. His office became a haven for anyone who needed encouragement, advice, or just someone to believe in them. And Lily grew up in a house filled with love. She grew up watching her father fly helicopters and her bonus mom run a company, learning that people came in all sizes and all of them could do extraordinary things. She grew up understanding that family wasn't about biology but about choice, about showing up for each other every single day. She also grew up knowing her mother's story. Victoria and Marcus made sure of that. Sarah's pictures were throughout the house. They visited her grave on birthdays and anniversaries. They told Lily stories about her mother's laugh, her kindness, her love of terrible puns. They made sure Lily understood that loving Victoria didn't mean forgetting Sarah, that the heart could hold infinite love without any of it being diminished. On quiet Sunday mornings, when Marcus would take Lily up in the helicopter for sunrise flights, one of their favorite traditions, Victoria would stand on the tarmac and watch them climb into the golden light. The sight never got old. Her husband and daughter ascending into the sky together, free and fearless and loved. She'd remember that day years ago when she'd mocked a stranger and he'd responded with grace, when she'd built walls and he'd shown her doors, when she'd offered him a cruel challenge and he'd turned it into a moment of transcendence, flying that helicopter like he was dancing with the clouds. The sky, Marcus had taught her, belongs to the brave. And bravery comes in all sizes. Sometimes, late at night, Victoria would find Marcus in his office, looking at an old photograph. Sarah, young and vibrant, her arms around Marcus, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. The first time Victoria had found him like that, she'd felt a spike of jealousy, of insecurity. But Marcus had pulled her close and explained. "I'm not wishing for her back," he'd said gently. "I'm just remembering, thanking her. She made me who I am. She gave me Lily, and she taught me how to love without fear. All of that led me to you." "Do you think she knows?" Victoria had asked. "About us? I think wherever she is, she's happy, because we're happy, because Lily is happy." He'd kissed Victoria's hand. "Love isn't a competition between past and present. It's all part of the same story, our story." Now, Victoria understood. The past didn't threaten the present. It enriched it. Sarah was part of their family, part of their story, even though she was gone. Her love had shaped Marcus into the man Victoria fell in love with. Her generosity of spirit lived on in Lily. Her final gift to her family had been permission to keep living, to keep loving, to keep finding joy. On their 5th anniversary, Marcus surprised Victoria with a gift. Not jewelry or flowers, but something more meaningful. He'd framed that first picture Lily had drawn, the one she'd made for his interview, The stick figure Daddy standing next to a helicopter, surrounded by hearts and the words, "Best pilot ever," in crayon. "This is where it started," Marcus said, "her belief in me. It gave me the courage to walk into your office that day, to take your challenge, to not give up." Victoria looked at the simple drawing, at the love and faith radiating from every crayon stroke, and she understood. This was what had saved them both. Not just Marcus's skill or Victoria's eventual change of heart, but a 7-year-old girl's unshakable belief that her daddy was the best pilot ever, and that good things could happen if you just kept hoping. "Where should we hang it?" Victoria asked. "I was thinking the living room," Marcus said, "right where we can see it every day. A reminder of where we came from, of what's possible when someone believes in you." So they hung it there, this simple crayon drawing, in a place of honor. And every time Victoria looked at it, she remembered the woman she used to be. Cold, cruel, convinced that vulnerability was weakness. She remembered the moment Marcus had climbed into that helicopter, and she'd realized she'd almost destroyed something precious because of her own pain. And she thanked God, or the universe, or whatever force had brought Marcus Webb into her life, because he'd saved her. Not by being perfect, but by being real. By showing her that courage wasn't about never being afraid. It was about flying anyway. As for Marcus, he'd wake up some mornings still half expecting to find it was all a dream. That he'd open his eyes in his old cramped apartment, alone, struggling to make ends meet. But then he'd feel Victoria beside him, hear Lily singing in the kitchen while she made breakfast, carefully supervised, and he'd know it was real. He'd built a life. Not the life he'd planned. Sarah's illness had destroyed those plans. But maybe a life didn't have to be planned to be good. Maybe it just had to be lived with an open heart, with courage, with the willingness to take the challenge even when the odds seemed impossible. The helicopter that had changed everything, November 429, Summit Alpha, had a place of honor in the fleet. They kept it in pristine condition, and Marcus still flew it regularly. Sometimes Victoria would ride along in the observer seat, and they'd fly the same pattern he'd flown that first day. And every time Victoria would feel her breath catch at the grace of his flying, at the way he and the machine moved as one. "You're still showing off," she'd tease through the headset. "Maybe a little," he'd admit, "but only for you." Their story spread through the aviation community, then beyond. A journalist wrote an article about them, not a puff piece, but a real exploration of prejudice, redemption, and love. It went viral. Suddenly, Marcus and Victoria were getting interview requests, speaking invitations, messages from people around the world who'd been inspired by their journey. They were careful with it, never exploiting their story, never pretending it was easy. They spoke honestly about the challenges, about Marcus's ongoing battles with discrimination, about Victoria's struggle to unlearn toxic behaviors, about the complexity of blended families. They didn't present themselves as perfect, because they weren't. They presented themselves as real people who'd chosen each other, who worked at their relationship every day, who failed sometimes but kept trying. And the message resonated, because everyone knew what it felt like to be judged unfairly. Everyone understood the weight of other people's expectations. Everyone had been hurt and had to decide whether to close off or stay open. Marcus and Victoria had stayed open, and it had changed everything. Now, as Victoria stood on the tarmac watching her husband and daughter descend from their sunrise flight, the helicopter settling onto the ground with Marcus's characteristic grace, she felt a fullness in her chest that she'd never known was possible. Lily bounded out of the helicopter the moment it was safe, running toward Victoria with her arms spread wide. "We saw a deer, like a whole family of them, and Daddy let me hold the controls for a minute." Victoria caught her, swinging her around. "Was it amazing?" "It was the best." Lily's eyes were shining. "Someday I'm going to be a pilot too, like Daddy, and like you when you finish your license. We'll all fly together," Victoria promised. Marcus walked over, pulling off his headset, his smile soft and warm. He'd aged well, Victoria thought. The lines around his eyes had deepened, but they were laugh lines now, not worry lines. His hair was starting to gray at the temples. He looked distinguished, happy, whole. "Good flight?" she asked, kissing him. "Perfect flight," he said. "Every flight with my girls is perfect." They stood there for a moment, the three of them, with the mountains behind them and the sky vast above. A family forged not by blood or convention, but by choice, by courage, by refusing to let the world define what was possible. "I love you," Victoria said to both of them. "Love you too," they chorused back. And in that moment, standing on the tarmac of Summit Aviation with the morning sun warming their faces, Victoria Blackwood Webb understood the truth that had eluded her for so many years. The sky didn't belong to the tall or the strong or the privileged or the perfect. The sky belonged to the brave, and bravery, she'd learned, comes in all sizes. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Let us know what moved you most about Marcus, Victoria, and Lily's journey. Was it the moment Marcus accepted the challenge, or Victoria's transformation, or maybe Lily's generous heart? Your thoughts and feelings mean everything to us, because these stories are about all of us, about finding courage when the world tells us to give up, about choosing love even when we're scared. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because it really does help us keep bringing stories like this to you. Stories about real courage, real transformation, and the kind of love that changes everything. Stories that remind us that the biggest hearts often come in unexpected packages, and that the best families are the ones we choose to build, one brave choice at a time. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for believing in stories where broken people become whole, where cruelty transforms into kindness, where a helicopter ride becomes the beginning of everything. We'll see you in the next one, with another story to remind you that no matter how small the world tries to make you feel, your sky is as vast as you're brave enough to claim it. Keep flying, keep believing, keep loving. We'll see you soon.